at things in such a complex relationship. We'll see that especially with Hegel. And the idea is that, the opposite of, we usually say, what are the opposites? We have the table of 10 opposites ever since Pythagoras, black and white, good and evil, male and female. Notice the female is under the evil side. Sorry about that. That's just Greek. The Greeks, fun for that. Have you ever seen the table of 10 opposites? Did I ever show you that? I've seen them in different order, but limit, unlimited, odd, even, one, many, right, left, male, female, rest, motion, straight, curve, light, darkness, good, evil, square, and oblong. I think part of the problem we have in interpreting this square is thinking that all the ones on the right column are related and all the ones on the left column are related. I don't think that's true. I think it's just showing us there's these 10 opposites. That there's no necessary. So the idea that the female is in the same column as evil, doesn't mean that females are evil. That's I don't think that's the case. So that's just fun. But when we think of that, they're not true opposites. And the contradiction is the non-thing. So if I say horse, the contradiction to a horse is a non-horse, not a cow or something of that sort. I mean, that's an example. So there. Okay. So that's just fun. Best of all possible worlds, God is the original infinite monad. To add even more dilemma to what a monad could be. And remember, the problem ever since Spinoza gave us such a beautiful analysis, really, of the scholastics vocabulary, you end up realizing that, wait a minute, if God is infinite, then God seems to be all there is, because if you have God as an infinite, what about all the finite things that would limit his infinite status? Well, that's, just ignore it, I suppose. His power, his wisdom, his goodness are infinite. Things or events are real when there is sufficient reason for their existence. A really interesting bit. I mean, this is really just a bullet summary of Leibniz's philosophy, which is really a lifetime's worth of study, of course, if you choose to get into that sort of thing. But part of the problem is that where was I? I got lost. What is history, actually, is the problem. We think of history as, well, that's what really happened. On the other hand, we have fiction. And we think of fiction as, well, that's not something that happened. It's pretty clear when you talk about something like Harry Potter, all that stuff, you have to have a temporary suspension of disbelief in order to enjoy the show. Because otherwise you're sitting there the whole time, that can't happen. No, that can't, what? You wouldn't enjoy it because you'd be critical every single moment of every, because none of this stuff actually could be true. Flying on a broom with no energy, you get the problem. I mean, there's all kinds of problems. So that's clearly fiction. History, on the other hand, that's real stuff. Except it seems now, of course, we're understanding what's going on here with the conflict, because history is actually an interpretation. It's a story. This happened, yes. This happened, yes. This happened, yes. the reason all these things happen is because, oh, now you're creating a story, and the story is your interpretation and not based on the fact. You're inventing something that's interpreting the connection of those facts that makes it art. So history today is thought of as an art. So you're not actually describing what happened, even though, remember, individual statements can be true. But once you put it together into a summation or an explanation of why the Roman Empire, took over so much, why Christianity took over the Roman Empire, why Western Europe became so industrialized and then basically became the world powers, right, and colonized all the other countries. I mean, how now you're getting into story when you're trying to explain that. Remember, even evolutionary theory, and by the way, there's a clue, theory is always story. You're imagining, okay, why is this happening? I have a theory. That's my interpretation, my story to explain this. And as a result, strictly speaking, theory, historical interpretation are neither true nor false. It's not like I'm saying you're wasting your time studying this stuff. No. In fact, remember, from Aesop Tales on, the moral of the story, which is an interpretation, right, is often considered more important than the details, like ravens and foxes argue with one another or something, right?
Grasshopper and ant.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we come up with all kinds of interesting stories to be fascinating with our children, to explain, the rabbit, is running by. I'm late for a very important date. What? He's got a clock even, right? He's looking at his big watch that he pulls out of his waistcoat. So Alice goes chasing after the rabbit. And famously, of course, falls down the rabbit hole, which let's not go down that rabbit hole, right? We still say that. But it's a fascinating story, right? Even though it's totally false, it's fiction. And yet, what's important? Well, there's a moral. Can we find the moral? And we even argue over whether morals are true. Although strictly speaking, grammatically, they're neither true nor false. They're an interpretation of something. Okay. So let's move on to Bishop Berkeley. I have this little bit added in here where I compare Leibniz and Stephen Hawking, although you might pull up Brian Greene or any other contemporary physicist today just to make a comparison and notice. Leibniz is 16-something, 1600, right? Contemporary of Hobbes, Spinoza, and John Locke, and yet and Berkeley, by the way. Berkeley is another contemporary. In fact, Berkeley and Leibniz write letters to one another and try to discuss things. I don't think they ever actually met, but in any case, they were engaged in helping one another more than Sir Isaac Newton was, actually. But so I like comparing Leibniz to contemporary physicists because compared to Sir Isaac Newton, he seemed to be much closer to what we have today. We still use Sir Isaac Newton, and Sir Isaac Newton, if you're familiar with Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's fantastic. He's fascinating to watch. He thinks Sir Isaac Newton was the greatest genius of all time.
He's coming to Anchorage in June.
Oh, is he?
Just be.
That was July.
Okay, July, yeah. June, July.
I'll go buy a ticket and sit and wait. No, I like him. Although he did demote Pluto. That bothered a lot of people. Pluto's no longer a planet. That's his fault. He made the decision. Okay, so let's talk about George Barclay. George Barclay, let's see, I'll do this separately. I don't lose that page. And by the way, the pronunciation is Barclay. But the college in California named in his honor is pronounced Berkeley. I have no explanation for that. Californians can't pronunciate nothing. I don't know. I don't know if there's actually something I said earlier in the class, the very first day maybe, was that I don't think there's any correct pronunciation of any word. Word, wide, word. You put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. There's problems. If you're from Louisiana, the way people talk in Louisiana, I'm sure I'm not even saying it correctly. Louisiana, or Edinburgh, I can't say that right either. I grew up in Philly, so I talk like I could, understand Rocky. You just have to pucker your mouth a little bit, and it's instant Philly. I don't know. But so, how do you pronounce Barclay? I think this will help me find it. Oh, and I want specifically, let me go. Did they take it away? They might have taken it. Let's go world. This is world.
History of Philosophy.
Oh shoot, this is just a...
Narrated by Vincent Price. Chapter 24, The Enlightenment.
Well,
And the way needles are made, the way...
nope, it looks gone. Not there. Shoot. There used to be a video that I could pull up where you could hear how they pronounce Barclay. And I'm just going to skip it because I can't find it. It's missing. Could be they took it down. In any case, Sophie's World, by the way, is a book that's about a young girl whose father is working for the UN. He's a colonel in the UN, and so he's not home, and so he writes her letters, and the letters are all about philosophy. So he starts off talking about Aristotle and asks her questions, who are you, and things of that sort, and as a result of this, you get this interesting dialogue in book form that's aimed at basically teenage girls. That's the target audience, it seems, for that. Although he's Swedish, it's a Swedish book, and so it's translation in English. But a lot of the local high schools actually use that text for a philosophy course. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with it or not, but that's interesting. And the Europeans made a TV show of that whole series, so that's what I was trying to find, but it looks like it's gone. Sorry about that. But George Barclay thought of himself as Irish. He was born in Ireland, I believe, His parents, however, were from England, so some people like to think that you're actually English instead of Irish. As he grew up and went to college, one of his closest friends was Jonathan Swift, who you might be familiar with from Gulliver's Travels and other writings of that sort. And in fact, Jonathan Swift had a publisher thanks to his connections with a noble. And if you were going to be published, you had to have a noble support you, basically. And so he introduced Barclay George to his sponsor, and that's how Barclay also ended up publishing his first book, which was an essay towards a new theory of vision. And it is kind of interesting because in that essay, it seems like he's the first one to realize that by having two eyes, that enables us to get perspective on things because of the geometry of vision. I can tell something's farther away and closer, etc. How big it is, all that sort of thing. But his main puzzle with vision was trying to figure out, well, how does it work? What are these particles that Hobbes and Locke think are entering into our eyes, and so on. And he's connected with Leibniz in thinking that everything is spiritual in the smallest particles. Now, if you read Berkeley, and I guess even Leibniz, from a certain point of view, you think these guys are just crazy. They're talking everything is spiritual and obviously it's physical. In fact, Dr. Samuel Johnson famously disproved Berkeley thus and kicked a rock, which was supposed to prove that the world is actually physical. And actually, I think just proved that Samuel Johnson didn't understand what Berkeley was arguing. That yes, it is physical, but so is your foot. Everything is physical, but what is physical? Physical consists of all these little monads that are spiritual beings. And what keeps them going for Berkeley is the mind of God, which is the same as Leibniz. Remember, the two of them, they're really in sync in a lot of ways. And for Berkeley, the problem with John Locke was his materialism, that if everybody grows up and believes John Locke and thinks everything is made out of material, and material is what physically is keeping the steady state universe that Isaac Newton argues for, then basically this is a clock that's running perfectly.